Welcome to the Exploring Potential podcast, where we delve into the realm of unique and novel ideas within organizations. Join us as we uncover the driving force behind innovation and success by engaging in thought-provoking conversations and stories with some of the brightest minds in various fields. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to the Exploring Potential podcast. I'm your host, Brett King. It's often or always on this show that we cover subjects that ultimately relate back to the people within our organizations. And it's even in our intro. We promise to uncover stories and explore practical strategies for managing, leading, and working with people. Today, we're going to cover this from a very unique angle, and we've got a brilliant guest to help us do just that. Before we introduce them, though, I would like to introduce our topic, which is something called people analytics or talent analytics. This is essentially a data-driven approach to supporting people thriving in organizations. So Emilio J. Castilla, a professor of management at MIT Sloan, defines people analytics as a data-driven approach to improving people-related decisions for the purpose of advancing the success of not only the organization, but also of individual employees. According to a really engaging article by Tam Harbert at MIT Sloan, Castilla says, when done right, people analytics allows you to know your people so well that you can keep them and your organization productive and effective, even in a constantly changing environment. Now I'll stop and ask, who among us is not in a constantly changing environment right now, right? Transcends industries. So it's also no secret that we use data for just about everything these days. And when I say data, most of us might start to think of the troves of our consumer data that social media companies and search engines have on us and probably elicit a bit of a shudder. It's become almost a bad word in some ways. But what if there were a way to utilize data to maximize the human experience at work? Like use this data superpower for good and create a situation that allows both the organization and the individual to thrive. So collecting and analyzing data in areas like recruitment, employee engagement, talent development, employee retention, etc., those can all lead to a better experience for better fit employees and a more productive and successful workforce for an organization. This leads us right to today's incredibly accomplished guest, Vicki Baker. Vicki is recognized as a top 100 visionary in education by the Global Forum for Education and Learning, as well as a top 10 visionary in education just this year. A Fulbright specialist alumna, she is the Maynard Aris Endowed Professor in Economics and Management at Albion College, where she serves as chair of the Economics and Management Department. Prior to joining the academy as a faculty member, Vicki worked at Harvard Business School Executive Education and at AK Steel Corporation. She earned her PhD in higher education and Master of Sciences in Management and Organization from Penn State University, as well as her MBA from Clarion University of Pennsylvania and Bachelor of Sciences from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And if that weren't enough, she holds a certificate in Human Resource Management from Villanova University and is a certified professional in HR through the Society for Human Resource Management. Vicki has written over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, invited opinion pieces for higher education news media outlets, case studies and blogs on the topics of faculty and leadership development and higher education. She has authored several books, too many to begin naming here, and has been featured in national and international media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, USA Today, New York Times, Chronicle of Higher Education, and the Huffington Post. Vicki, just wow with these credentials. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Brett. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I look forward to this conversation. This is the good stuff we get to talk about today.
This is the good stuff. This is the exciting stuff, and I'm so excited to hear and to share your perspective on all this. Before we get too far, Vicki, if you would, please tell us just a little more about your history and career focus over the years.
Absolutely. So, simply put, I just am really passionate about helping people grow and advance in their careers. And so probably not surprising, I'm a faculty member that has an opportunity to work with undergrad students. I do a lot of consulting work in the spaces of faculty and leadership development, as well as looking at overall ways in which we can be more strategic around career advancement. And so that's really my wheelhouse. And that's, like I said, the fun stuff that we get to do at work, really asking ourselves the questions, how are we helping people and positioning them to be their best selves? That's really what we do. And I get to do that on a regular basis.
I love that very much. Positioning them to be their best selves. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's what work and life is all about. So the fact that you're able to kind of take those and that's your day to day and that's the fun stuff you get to do. That's so exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, and plus I've loved school my whole life. So the fact that I get paid to be in it for the rest of my life is a pretty darn good gig. So there are worse places to be spending my time and worse people to be spending my time with. So I feel very grateful every day that this is my reality.
You're in a good spot and you're amongst good company. I love it. So if you could, Vicki, I tried to tee things up for us, but this is so much your wheelhouse, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this subject. Would you mind just describing what we mean by people or talent analytics, and what does this actually look like?
Absolutely. And again, I think it's, simply stated as trying to figure out how we help people to be their best selves and to position them in organizations, whatever those might be, to be individual contributors and organizational contributors. And so it really comes down to being able to attract, retain, and engage diverse talent. And I think that's a goal we should all have in organizations and that we should be striving for. And that requires us to be knowledgeable and immersed in the day-to-day operations of an organization, as well as how people contribute to those day-to-day organizations. And we're not able to be strategic or intentional in supporting individuals without data behind it, right? So we really need to be clear on our expectations. We need to be very intentional and strategic in supporting career advancement. And that requires us to have some of those fundamental building blocks. And I know we'll talk about that later, but it really is about, if you want to support organizational thriving and human thriving, you've got to know where you're at in order to get to where you want to be. And data helps us to do that.
That's how we get a flag in the ground, right? That's how we understand, this is our foundation, is, it's not based off of somebody's opinion. We're actually basing it off of real data. Before I move on to the next question, I want to go back to something you had said, because I think it's important for our listeners. You and I in conversations in the past have used these terms, and I would love, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of describing the difference between an individual contributor and an organizational contributor, because there's significant differences, right?
Absolutely. And most of us, you start your career, right, as an individual contributor, because that's what you have the capacity to do. And so you are focused on kind of the statement you hear, staying in my lane, but really cultivating that lane, mastering that lane, and understanding the ways in which your engagement in that space does have benefits to others in the organization. And so as someone advances in their career, their ability to be that really successful individual contributor catches the eye of those in upper level leadership and management positions, and that facilitates promotion. But guess what? Now you aren't just worried about only yourself. You now have a team you have to manage. You now have unit level, departmental level goals and initiatives that must be executed, that are also necessarily in service to the organizational strategic aims and priorities. And so we see a lot of people in industry, and Brett, I know your work with Exploring Potential works with organizations on trying to help individuals make this shift. You can be really effective as an individual contributor, but it is a hard and a heavy lift to make that shift. And I don't think organizations are as effective as they need to be or they could be in helping individuals make that shift, which brings us back to the topic of today. If we're really about people and talent analytics, we need to have the knowledge in order to equip individuals to make that shift for us, and we need to see what's happening.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So well put. And I love that you brought it right back around, because that's where we end right back up, is people analytics, right? So let me just ask you, I guess, point blank, why is people analytics important? If I own a company, or if I'm a C-suite executive at a company, and this is the first I'm hearing about this, or I haven't considered this, why should this be important to me?
Let me give you an example from the faculty development world that I think illustrates this, that helps us to realize that on the surface, we might think we're being successful, but then if you dig a little bit deeper, you realize maybe the well-intentioned efforts I'm putting forth are not actually producing the results that I want. So in faculty development work, I often get calls from provosts or people in charge of a portfolio of career advancement programs, right? We're putting in so much money and human resources to offer these programs, and we're just not seeing the return on investment in terms of engagement. So we're going to set a KPI of increasing our enrollments or registrants by 20% across these programs. Okay, well, that is a KPI. We can quantifiably measure that. And so let's say we have X number of programs in a given year, and we do see that the registrants had increased over that time. So if we simply just say it's about 20%, and at the end of the year we see we hit it, yay, pat ourselves on the back, we're good. But my question is, well, did you do a deeper dive via the metrics to find out where that increase occurred? That increase might have only been the majority population individuals on your campus. You have no women coming to the programs. You have no people of color coming to the programs. So are you really going to consider that a success? I would think not, right? So again, the well-intentioned actions and initiatives that we put forth, or the KPIs that we envision, are only telling a small portion of the story, the tip of the iceberg. And what's happening is we're seeing these disparate impacts of these organizational policies and practices that we're just unintentionally excluding or not supporting the development and career advancement of key populations in our organization. So while I might look at this and say I hit my 20% number, it's not telling you the whole story. That's why you've got to be very intentional about, are these the right KPIs? What are the metrics or the combination of qualitative and quantitative data that we're looking at that helps us know? And then our analytics, what questions are we asking about what the data is telling us? And that helps us to start surfacing and identifying things that, whoa, we didn't realize that was what was really happening. But if you don't collect the data and ask the right questions, you're going to think maybe you're being successful. And next thing you know, engagement is low, absenteeism is high. You're not retaining or attracting that diverse talent like you had hoped. So it really is important both for individuals as well as organizations.
That's really well put. So it's, those organizations that, and we all should be doing this, of course, is setting, key performance indicators and making sure that we're trying to hit our KPIs. But if I'm hearing you correctly, there's this risk that if we're not tying our organizational strategy, meaning what are those KPIs, into kind of the people side of things, or bringing HR in, or, taking into consideration the full breadth of data available to us, we may see an incorrect correlation, right? We may hit the KPI that we were after, but what were the negative side effects of that? And you brought up some good ones, right? You might, in higher education, maybe your enrollment is up, but maybe it's your majority students, and now there's less women, now there's less minority students on campus. The KPI was hit. And if we're not looking deeper, we may not see that there's problems with that actual metric in the first place. Is that fair to say? Absolutely.
And those should be a constant state of evolution. Again, are they serving us in the best purposes? But you've really got to be able to look at yourselves and ask the tough questions to really see if, again, I don't doubt that the majority of people, whether they're higher ed leaders or industry leaders, are well-intentioned. The majority are. And yet they're ill-equipped to really do the deeper dive, and this data-driven approach really helps us to have a framework to do it and helps guide us through the process of doing it. And I think makes a compelling case for why we should be doing it and continually being in a state of continuous learning as a result of our participation in a process like this.
And that's a perfect lead into my next question is why? What is the value add from an organizational perspective, and what is the value add to individuals that are impacted?
And that's a really important distinction. And I think so many times, whether it's at institutions of higher education or organizations, there's this perception of it's an either or, right? I either invest in the organizational strategic aims and priorities, or I have to invest in individuals. The sweet spot is alignment between those two. And in fact, I think when someone's strategic, they are situating the notion of human thriving at that intersection of individual needs with organizational strategies and aims. And in fact, I feel like you're not being strategic or intentional with how you approach this if you are not situating your efforts at that intersection. They are not, nor should they be, mutually exclusive. And I would tell organizational leaders it is worth investing in your individuals because that investment should be in service to your organizational strategic aims and priorities. You're missing the mark if your investment at the individual level is not in service to your organizational or institutional priorities or aims. So it's really about alignment for me. They're not mutually exclusive. And if you're strategic and intentional, you recognize that sweet spot, and that's where you're going to invest your time and energy.
That's so well put, because obviously these efforts need to be aligned with organizational strategy overall. That's where the company is going, right? But, you know, like we talked about a couple questions back, right? There's perhaps these missing pieces that shed light on really critical aspects of company strategy that need to be taken into consideration when gathering this data or analyzing this data when it comes to these different KPIs, and still meeting them and meeting these individual needs.
Absolutely. And hopefully the identification and codification of those KPIs was a collaborative effort, right? I'm not a fan of let me put these KPIs forth and expect individuals to be the people doing the work that achieves those KPIs, and you had no say in what those KPIs were. You know, we're missing that critical component of it should be a collaborative effort to help support face validity, to make sure we're being authentic, and to engage the individuals who have the responsibility for executing the work and the tasks that will help us achieve those KPIs.
Yeah, that's really well put. Do you have, now we use the higher education example. I'm curious if there's anything else top of mind for you, just to kind of bring things back tactically for our listeners, for our viewers. You know, do you have other examples of, you know, perhaps where organizational KPIs can be more married with people analytics, or, you know, or perhaps if easier, you know, how can we expand the people analytics piece to better serve our KPIs? You know, do you have specific examples of that?
Yeah, I see a lot in industry around investing in those programs that will support individuals' career advancement, right? But it really is a need to be strategic about that. I use the word advancement over performance because in my mind, if we think performance, you either performed or you didn't. It's an either or scenario. Advancement or development shows an ongoing evolution where we're helping people to evolve over the nature of their careers. And so even that shift alone, that change in narrative and the language that we use, and then thinking about what are those programs or those infrastructures that need to be in place that support a notion of development and advancement over merely performance. We don't want a teaching to the test situation in organizations. I know I've got to achieve this as I look ahead to my performance appraisal. And so I'm seeing the more forward thinking organizations that work in a learning organization perspective adopt that mindset. It's not performance, it's development and it's advancement. And we know that ebbs and flows along that trajectory. And so it shouldn't be either you met my expectations or you didn't. It's just too deficit model of an approach. It's an either or. And if I missed it, man, I feel terrible about myself. My morale feels low. Now as a manager, I'm trying to figure out a way to re-motivate this person after I just delivered maybe not the greatest of news. So I think tactically it really is about thinking, what is our language? What are our infrastructures? What are our policies? And are they about engendering performance that's an either or is it about engendering this notion of advancement and development along someone's trajectory in their career? And that's just beneficial for individuals and organizations.
And I know you've gone into this in your answer, but you've really intrigued me. You know, talk to me a little more about performance versus advancement. You know, where do you draw those lines and how is that significant?
For me, and again, I say this, right, as someone who is in their middle stage of career, middle stage of life. And we're not either or scenarios, right? And today I could wake up and I'm on my game, and tomorrow maybe it's not my best work. And so I just think we're setting up this situation in which individuals feel this need to constantly be performing, and you have to constantly be at your best in order to be perceived as someone who is a contributing member to an organization or a contributing member to your community. That's not realistic. That's not life. And we don't perform at our best every single day. And so we need systems and infrastructures in place that acknowledge that human aspect of life and career, and that provides the necessary supports to enable that to happen. But if I'm expected to be on my best and perform at my maximum every single day, I don't know how I would avoid burnout. I don't know how I would avoid exhaustion. I don't know how I would avoid feeling of inadequacy or imposter syndrome at some point, because it's just not humanly possible. And we need to acknowledge that in organizations, account for it, and build those realities into strategic career advancement policies and practices.
Excellent answer. And I'm going to play the the devil's advocate here of somebody who, let's say all I care about is numbers, right? Performance. What do you say to somebody that pushes back on, no, it's all about performance, right? What are, you and I know, but I would love to hear you explain, what are the business impacts of if you just push too hard down that performance road and not take this advancement process that you've really clearly laid out, or philosophy rather, what do you say to somebody who might be, hesitant about this idea that it's not all about performance, that there's these other really key aspects to it?
Absolutely. And, obviously people need to be competent at their jobs, and they need to provide a value add, and you can still be human. And so someone who's going to push back on that, I would tell them, good luck keeping your talent, right? Like people, in a consulting experience I had with an organization who is well known, reputable, has global recognition, and kind of feels like that field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. Well, of course people would want to be here. We're so-and-so. But they had recently, as a result of the pandemic, had a pretty mass exodus, particularly of diverse individuals. And I go, you can sit back all you want and think people are going to come flock to us, but your talent just communicated their values to you with their feet. And so it might be time to reevaluate the approaches you're taking right now. And so you can pretend it's about performance all you want, but performance at the cost of humanness and well-being and employee engagement, because you can perform but not be engaged. I care more about engagement. So sure, you can keep a system that's all about performance. Good luck retaining and engaging that talent for too long. Yes.
Oh, perfectly put. And kind of brings it again full circle to the people analytics piece. Is there's more to measure here. There's more we can figure out. If performance is that important to you, then people analytics can help us discover, okay, who are your top performers and what is it that keeps them around or attracts them? You can still take these ideas of people analytics and putting people first and advancement first versus performance and still get performance. And by the way, keep your people around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen instances, whether it's in athletics or higher education or business, right? If you are a boss or a leader, and I say leader not because you have a title, a leader because of your actions and behaviors, I want to clarify. You and I both work for people who have a title. I would not consider them a leader. They're, but someone who really is a leader. And if you show me an investment in who I am as a person, as well as the contributor I am, I'll knock down walls for you. I will knock down walls for you, and I will do my best. And that means I will perform, and I will be engaged, and I will be committed, and I will be the best darn advocate and representative of this organization and its values that you could possibly want. So I need to see that investment from the individual and commitment into me as a human, and a human doesn't perform. You can get a dog to perform. You can get a horse to perform tricks, right? I'm not that person. I want you to recognize and invest in my development and my advancement as a person and a professional. And again, I'll knock down walls for you. And I think other people would knock down walls for the leaders that they work for.
I couldn't agree more. And I wanted to actually say that this is not, now I know you personally enough to know that you are that person. You would knock down those walls, right? But I think what I want to say to, to our audience too, is that this is achievable, attainable. This isn't a Vicki is a special person and we need to find a Vicki. This is, you can set the infrastructure and the foundation where you can bring any or most employees to that point with that actual strong leadership. I like what you were saying. I often will talk about managers in title versus leaders in practice is how I usually sort of separate it. Is like, yeah, your title doesn't mean anything, but your behaviors mean everything.
Absolutely. Well, it goes back to even our brief conversation before recording started. Would you like me to introduce you as doctor? And I go, no, it's not necessary. People see my credentials and it just means I went to school a little bit longer than other people. To me, it really comes down to who am I as an individual? How do I carry myself? What are my behaviors and actions? How do I show others respect? How do I help foster their growth and development? How do I build trust? To me, that's what matters. And I need to be that person if I'm going to help others focus on people or talent analytics and why it is strategic and wise to invest in career advancement in service to organizational aims, but not at the cost of individual and human thriving.
Yes, not at the cost of, more in addition to or to support.
Absolutely. It's in service. I'm all about it's in service. Yes. We are working in service. And again, it's not mutually exclusive.
So let's say I'm listening and this is our goal, right? I'm listening, I'm convinced and this is new to me, but I see the benefits. I want to start to develop people talent analytics within my organizations or organization rather. Who do I need to involve? How do I get this off the ground for my organization if we're starting from scratch?
It's important to think about who are your key stakeholders, internal and external. I'm under no illusion that we don't need to think about those external customers, whether it's a student in higher ed or whether it's a consumer of our product or service. Those internal stakeholders, the employees who, again, at the end of the day are the ones executing the tasks that help us achieve those KPIs. So that should be, those people should be represented at the table. At the core, it's about values. So what are our values? What are our organizational values? And the more important question, what do those values look like in action? And are we investing in those values in a way that demonstrates a clear connection to our strategic aims and sending that signal that we care about human thriving? And so it really is about stakeholders at the table, clarity about values, commitment to the values, explicit understanding about what those values look like in action, and being willing to hold that mirror up to yourself, right? Like, it's not always flattering. And so we've got to be able to look at ourselves, to ask the hard questions, disseminate the knowledge gleaned from that tough look in the mirror, and propose some actions moving forward to make change. And so it's really about bringing people to the table and honoring who you are, and maybe honoring who you are means re-envisioning who that might be moving forward. And really setting, you've got to have clearly communicated KPIs. You've got to be clear on what metrics that you currently have or that you need quantitatively and qualitatively. And are you asking the right questions? Again, going back to the 20%. Great, I hit my mark. I wouldn't consider that a success, right? Because of what the analytics told us. So those are the foundational building blocks for me, but it's really got to be rooted in the values, because the KPIs should be linked to the values. The metrics should be linked to the values. The questions we're asking via analytics should be linked to those values. And any corrective actions we take moving forward or investments we're going to make should be in service to those values.
Right. Right. I love that it comes back to values. I mean, that really is where companies need to be operating from. Everything starts there and extends from there. And what I also hear you say is we need to make sure, if we're going to start this process, that we've got the right people at the table, that we're not leaving anybody out, that we've got the right perspectives, the right decision makers, the right key stakeholders, as you mentioned, at the table at this point, to kind of take what you've so gracefully, tactfully laid out for somebody that really wants to get started in this. It sounds like it's absolutely critical that 1, alignment with value, 2, the right people at the right seats at the table in order to make this actually happen.
Absolutely. And another thing, an important distinction that I put out there, or attention, and there's no right answer to this, but you've got to have the people at the table that can manage the needs of the moment and also anticipate the needs of the future, right? And so if we're only focused on, well, this is what we need here and now, good luck persisting, right? So we've got to balance, and there's a tension, and there's no one right way to manage that tension. But you need the people at the table that, again, can recognize and address the needs of the moment while anticipating the needs of the future, which, again, is not going to happen without the investment in the people or talent analytics and really being thoughtful and collaborative and evolutionary when thinking about those KPIs versus metrics versus analytics.
Love that. Love that. Before I move on to our next brief segment with you, Vicki, I'm kind of at the end of my question set, including my follow-ups that, I really wanted to get from you, and you've been, it's been so valuable. Before we move on to our next segment together, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like is critical to this conversation that we want to make sure to communicate?
Something that we didn't explicitly talk about, but I think it's implicitly there, but worth an explicit mention. Anytime you're trying to collect data from individuals, there's going to be this concern that at some point it could come back and bite me, or it's going to be punitive in nature, right? Like, I'm going to happily participate in this process, and then I might participate myself out of a job at some point, or I might highlight that I haven't been adept or effective as a manager or a person in a leadership role at navigating this. We've got to create organizational cultures in which the identification of those things is welcome and accepted as a necessary part of this process. Mm-hmm. That as much as we can, we have to communicate and set a structure that shows this isn't meant to be punitive or meant to try to weed people out or to find the slackers in the organization. And inevitably, those things might arise. But if you're really going to get buy-in and people to be focused on your intention of human thriving, then you've got to create a system that enables human thriving to happen, and to also recognize when human thriving may not be happening, and that's okay. And then that just opens up opportunities for us to figure out what investments or reallocation of resources need to be made to move the needle on these areas that maybe aren't achieving in the ways that we want to. But human nature is going to dictate where people are like, oh, I want to believe that your intentions are good and altruistic. But if I put myself out there authentically, I'm maybe setting myself up for problems down the road. And so I may only dip my toe in this process a little bit while still protecting myself. And that's not going to garner the kind of response that you really want to be getting. So I think it's important for us to be explicit about that.
That makes perfect sense to me. You want that genuineness accepted within your company culture, and also for employees to feel that safety, which is an indication of a strong company culture. That safety of, oh, like, now that there is all this data, I am falling short in these areas I had no idea about. But if the company supports that from a cultural standpoint, like, yeah, we expect that. That's why we're measuring it. We expect it. That's okay. And communicates that, right, then it seems like some of those concerns can kind of be, dispelled a bit more. It's not the same kind of data concerns we have over, the social media tracking our every movement. It's a different level of concern, to your point. How's this going to reflect on my performance? Well, if you're an organization, you've really got to do the work on the culture side to make it clear this is not about gotchas. This is more about how do we bring ourselves up together.
Absolutely. And I would add to that too. I think the beautiful piece, or one of the beautiful pieces of this, is it also illustrates that someone's success or advancement or development isn't strictly an individual endeavor. Lift your bootstraps up and work harder. Well, guess what? For some populations, no matter how hard they work, there's institutional or organizational barriers that prevent that. Right. And so this process also recognizes that organizations, we're going to identify some things that are going to highlight our organizational failures, that even if you put forth your best performance every day of your life for 365 days, you still couldn't have achieved what we set out to do because we didn't equip you with the tools and the resources to do it. So also communicating that this is not just about individual agency. There's organizational responsibility that comes with it. And that this process will also reveal some of those individual growth opportunities as well. And then that enables us to be more strategic in our investments in the areas that we focus on.
Yes. Creating a development first culture within our organizations.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And wouldn't you want to work at a place like that? Right. I mean, I think,
heck yeah.
I think it'll speak for itself. Word starts getting out, but when you feel valued and appreciated, again, you're going to knock walls down. And when you work at an organization that also recognizes we're not perfect, we make mistakes, and we also need to be collecting this information so that we can have the gut checks and the looks in the mirrors that we need to help us recognize when change needs to be made or investments need to be made or tough decisions need to be made. Again, it's not just individual thriving or failure. It's also organizational thriving and failure. And we need to identify those things through this data-driven approach.
Right. And being in it together, because we are. If you're in an organization, nobody's on an island. It's all related. Well, Vicki, I've so appreciated you being on today, sharing your absolute brilliance with us. This has been a really enlightening conversation. This is the part of the show where I do like to pause for just a few moments and allow you to plug or promote whatever is most important to you personally right now. If there's a company, initiative, idea, you name it, I'd just like to give you this opportunity of time to speak on that now as a thank you for taking the time with us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Right now I'm working on another book, right? And so I've got an edited volume coming out that features the great work of colleagues across the academy focused on mid-career. And you know this too, and the work at Exploring Potential is so, could do a masterclass on this, but it's one thing to talk about the big ideas, but you need to give people the tools to be able to do it, right? We can tell individuals you should invest in leadership development, or at institutions you should invest in your mid-career faculty. And I think people appreciate that and understand that that's important. It's the how to do it where the disconnect sometimes occurs. So I'm really excited about this edited volume because it's called it's a toolkit, and each chapter features a tool or tools at the individual level, the institutional level, the professional association level, and kind of the grant funding level that enables leaders to be able to take the great work that's happening across the academy and to think about what would that look like? How could I adapt and adopt it for my purposes? So it's not just the 10,000 foot view of the issue, but here's the issue and here's how it looks in my institutional setting or our professional association or as we're thinking about our larger disciplinary areas. And here's explicit tools that we use to move the needle on these issues. And so I'm all about those practical tools and the connection between we have this knowledge, we now have a responsibility to do something with it and to help make people's lives better. So I'm really excited about that. I'm getting ready to submit the final draft of it to the publisher. It's due on October 1st, so it should be in print in spring by Routledge. And so I'm really excited about that, but even more thrilled with the amazing group of individuals who so willingly contribute their knowledge and their programs to it. And I just think it ties back to our conversation about the responsibility we have in organizations that, number one, you've got to ask the questions. Two, you've got to analyze and figure out what you're learning from those questions and how are you going to act on it. We have a responsibility to do something with the knowledge that we have to make organizations and people's lives better. And so I'm hopeful that the volume, that was how it was conceived, and I hope that it is received in that way as well. So I'm happy to be able to have a moment to talk about that forthcoming work that's coming out.
That is so exciting and such important work. And I love all of it. But what I really love is how tactical it sounds like you've made this. I'm very excited for this to come out because I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, sometimes we can talk about these concepts, but if we don't give the tools, right, it's not as easy. Or if we expect them to find the tools on their own. So it sounds like what you've put together is a really tactical approach to all of this, and that's good for you. I'm so proud to know you, and your work is just so extraordinary. It speaks volumes, and The fact that you've got more of it coming out, there were too many books to even mention in your intro. So the fact that there's more coming out, it gives everybody something else to look forward to, because as we can tell, this is such an important conversation, and you're taking it to the next level.
Absolutely. And I enjoy being able to engage with others in these conversations and have the opportunities in higher education and industry to consult with others on these topics. And you know, as well as I do, when you have that opportunity to be that educated outsider coming into an organization and help them and to see the outcomes of that help, it's super rewarding. And so I'm just thrilled to be able to have this conversation and to be in good company with you and to hopefully help others through the conversation that we had today and to see what's possible out there.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And thank you again, Vicki, for your time today. It's always such a pleasure to get to speak with you, especially in areas that we're both so passionate about.
Exactly. Well, listen, thank you so much. And please, from me, tell the Exploring Potential team I said hello. You've got you're surrounded by an amazing group of individuals, which certainly also makes your day to day not too shabby either. So thank you to you and for all the support. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am very blessed every day and very lucky to have a team of amazing people and that we all get to know people like you as well. So a couple quick reminders just to wrap up here for everyone. People analytics, at the end of the day, it boosts data-driven decision-making. It helps to streamline HR processes and optimize our talent, which, as we've heard throughout the episode, there's so many benefits to at an individual and organizational level. It can enhance the employee experience. It can enhance productivity. And honestly, it can provide a competitive edge and even cost savings as well. The approach can, people talent analytics approach can aid in future planning, align those HR goals with the overall business objectives. We talked a lot about that. Vicki shared some really good gems in terms of connecting those strategic KPIs to people analytics and making sure that, we're not just looking at a part of the puzzle, but we're looking at the entire picture. And so really, bottom line, people and talent analytics can help transform HR into a strategic partner for organizational success. And I think that piece alone is worth us paying attention to. And hopefully this is motivating others to want to look into this a little bit more. So I want to thank you all for listening and watching. This has been a really fun episode. And thanks again to Vicki for joining us. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks for your time.